I will introduce the teams. Sarah, would you say hello to everybody? Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Sarah Slane. I'm the homeowner. Do you want more background about myself?
Well, is this your first home that you built?
This is the first home that I've built in Baltimore County, and so totally new to the process, and look forward to kind of talking to you today. I was told I can be honest, so I can be very brutally honest.
Yeah,
I will try to keep myself in check, but hopefully I can provide you with some background and insights from my experience.
The rest of us won't be honest, just for the record. Did you have a lot of technology in the house you lived in that you're moving out of?
No,
okay.
That would be a very easy answer. As I said earlier, I either don't roll in the right circles with people that have a lot of high technology in their homes, but no, and I've kind of moved around the country as well. So I grew up in Ohio, I lived in Las Vegas, I live in Baltimore now, so I had kind of a good gamut of different architecture and home experiences. And I would say that what has been really enlightening to me right now is just kind of, I think, thinking through and now looking backward, maybe decisions that could have been made on the front end that would have probably helped me in the long run.
Right. Great. Hey, let's switch to Greg. We have one person who could not make it, and that's Greg, the builder. Hey, Greg, say hello to everybody. Introduce yourself,
Hello.
Please.
I'm Greg. I'm the principal of Moliere Construction, and happen to be the builder building Sarah's home.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming, and we love the artwork from your kids behind you.
Yeah, I'm trying to block the angry, whatever that is there.
Yeah, no, our first meeting, it's great. So they've had a lot of rain there. His office is out of power, so he's taking this from the home. Thank you for joining, Greg.
Yep,
Vince,
absolutely.
the architect. Say hello,
me.
Vince.
Hi, my name is Vince Green. I run Vince & Green Architects out in Baltimore. We've been around for about 25 years now. We do mainly high-end residential construction, and we were really happy and lucky to be part of this team. This is a great project. It's almost complete at this point.
Awesome.
But the fun part for you guys today is that I get to be the punching bag for the builder community, because like a lot of architects, we're behind the curve and we're trying to do better.
Yeah, I think that's something that, as builders, be proactive with your client and the architect, and you'll see some recommendations here that you might be able to use to help get those conversations going early. And I'm going to hand the clicker to Sean. Sean, say hello to the group, introduce yourself, and then take it away.
Hi, I think a lot of you have been here before and seen me, but I'm one of the original founders of Brabus. We're a national integrator, and my job and our job as Brabus is to pull together all these pieces of these electronic system installations and to get folks like Sarah educated earlier, and the point of this conversation today is to explain that we didn't do a very good job of that with you, but we didn't do a terrible job either. So I've been sort of shouting from the mountaintops for a long time that technology is an important part of the construction process, and we've always been brought in sort of toward the end of the conversation or in the middle of it at the very best. And Vince and I have known each other for probably 20 years now, and I think Vince has always been good about getting us in early, but I think hopefully recently you've seen more reasons why, and that's what we want to share with you today.
Great. All right, let's kick it off.
Awesome. So you don't have to read all these little circles on this diagram, but this is sort of the way that traditionally I've experienced being an integrator. So that's the construction process of deciding to build a house, engaging with an architect, going through some schematic design process, which these two did together, and please feel free to interject if it didn't work out that way. But once you have that schematic design together, and you start to enter that design development phase, there's trades or designers that are brought into the conversation. Sometimes there's a lighting designer, sometimes there's a lighting showroom, sometimes there's a landscape architect, there's an interior design team or an interior designer, and they're involved in that step between schematic design and full design development and construction documents being issued.
I like to call this death by 1,000 cuts, because every single time it was like, really, is this more money that I have to pay someone else to tell me what to do? Like, it's this is a great articulation sort of the process and how overwhelming it can be.
So Vince, this is a good time to ask you, did you bring these designers to the table? Did you bring them yourself? Was it a combination of the two? When did you introduce these people?
It was a combination. Oftentimes when we start a project, the client will actually bring a designer along. This one happened pretty early on, so we had a designer who, frankly, I would say, the designer and our office got along very well, but neither one of our offices were, into tech the way that we probably should have been. And so while we were focusing on the basics of the schematic design, we probably could have run over 3 or 4 different categories that would have put us, a few months ahead in what we were trying to do for Sarah, which what we're trying to do on the end of the project now.
Great. So after that construction set is built, in theory, you're putting it out to builders for bid. You're getting pricing back from those builders based on the specifications you developed. And then those yellow circles are when the builder's now talking to his trades and subcontractors, which would be electric, plumbing, mechanical for the most part. And the forward-thinking builders, and including Greg in this particular conversation, bringing at least a portion of the technology into that budget. But Sarah, I think you can testify to the fact that we didn't have everything covered in that before you met me, which means that we don't get to the party as the integrator until after that. So what happened, or where do you think it could have gotten better?
Yeah, and Greg can add to this as well. And I talked to him after the process, and I think everyone's sort of put in this position of not really knowing until you have the conversation. So he can put a budget number in there, but until I kind of walk through it and say, well, this is actually what I want, or this is how I want things to be developed and designed, and you just don't know until you go through that process that we did later on. And so I think to your point, having that happen at the beginning of the process probably makes a lot of sense. And again, I'm a novice. Like, this is the first home I've ever built. I was very fortunate. I started with Greg as my builder. He made recommendations. I have an amazing team of people that I work with, from designer to architect to you, and I'm leaning on you to tell me what I need to do. Now, it's ultimately my choice, I get it, but I feel like it's just sometimes it feels a lot like a piecemeal kind of process.
Hey, quick question. So, Greg, do you put a budget or an allowance for technology in your initial discussion on budget?
Yes and no. So a lot of times, the builder, or I in this case, will work with the architect or Vince to develop some of the allowances in the house, because obviously every house needs tile and countertops and cabinets. And those kind of things are not even thought about or selected at the time that the budget is approved.
Right.
And when you are a builder bidding against other builders, the architects will give you a specification sheet that they want everybody to follow, so they have an apples to apples. And unfortunately, this is kind of one of those phases that's just forgotten about. Yeah. It's not a no harm, no foul type thing, but it's just forgotten about. And, Sean and I had this conversation that had I put an allowance in there that would have handled Sarah's needs, it would have thrown my number far over the other people bidding the job, right? So the other thing is throwing a big number in there like that in the beginning, just as a earmark. Homeowners right off the bat are like, I don't need that. When you're trying to value engineer the house down and get it within their budget, immediately they're going to say that, but not until they meet somebody like Sean, who says, well, Sarah, you have 10-foot tall windows in your house. We might want to put some Lutron shades on those. Or what about security? What about cameras? It's just, I think it's stuff that just gets lost.
Yeah. How about the audiences? How many of you actually put an allowance to start the conversation about tech in the beginning? Yeah, so not a lot of hands are going up. That's one way to get the conversation going, and I don't know if it differentiates the builder who says, let's talk about tech. If the other builders didn't, at some point, if you don't talk about certain things like solid surface counters or radiant heat, you're going to say, what kind of builder are you? So I think tech is becoming that, and it's potentially a way to get the conversation going.
Well, I want to push back on that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I want to push back on that a little bit.
Sure.
Because, Vince, we talked about this earlier, and I understand Greg's point completely, that as a builder, if there's 3 bids going in on a Vince project, and one of the bids includes $250,000 worth of technology, the other 2 don't, either a really progressive homeowner is going to say, hey, you're thinking about me, let's talk about this, or they're going to say, you're out of your mind, I don't want to work with you. But if we brought it earlier to the party, where Vince said, the technology integrator is now a technology designer, and as part of the initial conversation, maybe right at somewhere between schematic design and design development, puts together an outline and a budget, a very detailed scope of what it includes. Then that client, before they commit to a builder or commit to a project or commit to a budget, has an opportunity to review those things. I just said what you were probably going to say, but please say it again.
what I was going to say is, I think look, you guys know how it is at the beginning of a project. The psychology is, you're just meeting the clients. You're just putting the team together. You're learning about the designer. You're learning about all of the pieces and parts. And it's very difficult at that time, to talk about a subject matter that might be a really big part of any budget. But along the line of what we've been saying here, I do think that it's important for us to start putting those plugins earlier on, even if they aren't exactly fleshed out yet, Sean, even if we don't know what all the answers are. Because for one thing, it makes the builder look good, because it makes the builder look like they're progressive, that they know what they're doing, and I think that's a positive thing. The architect looks at it and says, well, you know what, if this is scary to Sarah or to my client, it's a pretty easy thing for us to take out cleanly. It's not like we have to change the stone, specification for all the countertops. It's a clean thing that we can pull out. So I do think that there's a time for it, but for the architects and probably for builders too that start a project, finding the right time to talk about it is still, it's still something that we're working out.
With MEPT, we've got technology going into the plumbing. We've got water shutoff. We've got leak detection. We got smart circuit breakers on the electrical side. You've got renewable storage, EV charging. So tech's creeping into those things. Who's talking about that in the project?
I mean, right now it's the integrator.
Yeah.
We have, and you've probably seen it, if not, we can show you later. We built a solutions guide that I think is now up to like 85 pages worth of this stuff, which is a catalog that we ask our homeowners to read through, or potential buyers to read through, just to get an idea of all the things that we do. So you can sort of rule out or rule in the things that are important to you. But to your point, there's so many things that are sort of intertwined and interwoven into the construction of a home now that didn't used to be. I mean, when I started doing this a billion years ago, I was the AV guy. I put speakers in the ceiling. I ran some speaker wire, and I ran some TV jacks, and I put speakers in the ceiling. So I didn't need to be there until the end. We walked around, we pointed, we came out the next day with a truck and a couple spools of wire and a drill, and we wired the house, and we put the speakers in. 30 years later, it's not that way at all anymore. And I think that there's a difference between the technology that you're going to see here that I'd consider like smart technology, Ring doorbells and Nest thermostats and connected stuff to apps. That's all cool stuff. We don't have to plan for a lot of that early on. The planning really is all the stuff that you just listed.
And lighting.
Right, lighting fixtures, lighting controls, and that's a huge thing for Vince and I right now, and I think for Sarah too. We'll touch on that in a minute.
Yeah, great.
But there's also a lot of things that homeowners don't even know are out there.
Right.
Until you actually tell them those 85 pages of things, they don't even know. And so we're leaving a lot on the table, even as builders, as Sean with Bravis, that if you don't put these things in front of the homeowner, you're not going to sell them, right? So it's good to get that out in front of them early on as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think when I think about the process that we went through, if it had happened at the beginning, to say like, because I understand it is a bit of a game, right? You guys have to go bid. You, as a client, right? I'm going to probably go with maybe not the cheapest, but what makes the most sense. But there is a big question mark around this piece of it, and to have sat down maybe in the beginning and said, this is what this entails and encompasses, and to get a feel, and to your point, like you don't have to nail it down exactly, but just to get a feel for, are you going to lean, Sarah, a little bit more technology heavy, or are you not? Are you, we've been going through this right now. I think, again, on the front end probably would have been more hopeful.
I think for you, this was somewhat of a surprise, and no one likes expensive surprises.
Yeah.
So we had an oh shit moment together, I think, where you saw everything. It was like, whoa, wait, what is all this?
Yeah.
So you said something, death by 1,000 cuts. If someone is introducing option after option over weeks and months, is that more painful than saying, let's talk about it up front, you can weigh all the things? Do you feel like people are trying to upsell you with that?
No, I never felt, I mean, I trust and respect everyone that I work with, that I've hired. They've been wonderful. It felt.
You feel like you've come to your budget, it's like another thing.
It just is, I mean, again, I'm a novice. This is the first time I did it. I've built a home. I'm doing it on my own. Like, you just don't realize sometimes how many little decisions that you have to make. Right. And people told me that, but until you actually live it, you're like, oh, wow, landscape architects and everything else. So I think, again, just kind of on the front end, having said, okay, this is a big bucket that we need to talk about because it is part of your home. And as you think about your budget and, you know, where you start to cut things back or add things, how important is this to you? And, you know, we've been going through that and the oh shit moment, and it's like, yeah, but I really want all this stuff, and what am I willing then to kind of trade off? And had I known in the beginning, maybe I would have thought about it differently.